Dr. Will Tuttle, welcome to the Urban Pharmacy Podcast. I am super thrilled to have you here.
Thank you, Stacey. Thanks everyone for watching.
I met you at the Woodstock Fruit Festival just last week. I'm super sad that it's over, but it was amazing to connect with so many awesome human beings. And I wanted to get your story. I wanted to share your message with everyone. And so that's why I asked you to come on today. So thank you for your time and being so gracious. I know that you are at Hippocrates right now, Health Institute. You are there with your wife, right?
Yes, yeah, Madeline and I are here. And this is a place, if you haven't heard of it, it's considered one of the premier places to go in the United States and in the world to heal using primarily an organic, whole, plant-based diet, mainly raw. And we've been coming here for many years, I would say probably 15 or 16 years, giving lectures, promoting vegan living, and as part of our ministry, really to help share the many benefits and advantages for ourselves, for the planet, for animals, for all of us, by stop eating animal foods and start eating whole, organic, plant-based foods.
Yeah.
And so it's delightful to be here because we see literally dozens and dozens of people coming in, most of them all with some kind of health affliction. Cancer is quite usual, but also diabetes or arthritis or obesity, all these things. And we see wonderful progress. A lot of people leave without their medications anymore, or they just have lost 20 pounds, or these kinds of things. So it's a holistic way of doing things based on not only eating a lot of sprouts and raw, whole, organic foods, but also getting plenty of exercise and really working especially with the mind. The people who run this have found that over the last 40 years of doing this, that the attitude is probably the most important thing, having a positive attitude and really understanding how we're interconnected with each other and how our health is determined by our food and by our relationship with nature and by our relationships with other people, and having a purpose in our life that's positive. All these things are really important. So this all works together, and it's very inspiring to be here. So we're here usually the last 4 years for about 2 months, giving lectures and concerts. I play the piano, my wife plays the flute. So we do lectures, concerts, just encouraging the people with understanding the deeper structure of our society and how food is so important for all aspects of our health.
It really is. And you are very passionate about that. So passionate about that you wrote a whole book called The World Peace Diet. And we're going to break that down. I want to hear more about it. I will admit I don't have that book yet. I know I've heard of it. I know I've seen you chat with Dr. Frank Sabatino and all of the, many of the plant-based greats. And yeah, I'm just really excited to share this message. And also, I'm just interested to hear your story. I want to know why you live this way now. And I don't think that you've lived this way. You haven't been living a plant-based lifestyle your whole life, right?
Right. Yeah, so briefly, I was raised in Concord, Massachusetts back in the 1950s, eating the usual meals of lots of meat, dairy, and eggs. And I didn't question it. That's what everybody ate. My parents, my friends, my neighbors, teachers, the minister at the church, the doctor, all the TV, everybody. And when I was about 7, I asked my mother, Mom, the kind of food we're eating, is this what everybody eats? And she thought for a minute and she said, yeah, it's pretty much what everybody eats. And then she came back a few minutes later. She left and came back and she said, that's not totally true what I told you. There are people who eat differently. They're called vegetarians. Oh, wow. And I had never heard that word in my life, and I was curious because it was kind of this interesting long word. I liked learning long words at that point. So I said, what's a vegetarian? And she thought for a minute and she said, I don't worry about it. You're never even going to meet one. I don't know where they get their protein. So in my young mind, I had this idea that these vegetarians were very rare and they didn't get enough protein. So I was so glad I wasn't a vegetarian. And that was pretty much the end of it. I never heard another word about it, but I continued living my life. And when I was in my early teens, I went away to a summer camp in Vermont every year for a few years, and we would, my brother and I, and my younger brother, and we would do things, not only canoeing and hiking, but we would also work on the farm a little bit. And I learned how to catch my own chicken, how to hold her down, have my axe, cut her head off, do all that. We would also every year gather around one of the dairy cows, and we would kill her and butcher her. And so I saw, the whole, I participated in the whole killing of animals when I was in my teen years. And I didn't like doing it. It was pretty shocking, especially with the dairy cow. It's just such a large animal, and with so much suffering. You witness that and participate in it. Yeah. But I didn't have any orientation that would ever let me question it at all. I knew at that point I was basically indoctrinated into the cultural food program, and I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that God gave us certain animals to eat. They don't have a soul, they taste good. If you don't eat them, you're going to die within 24 hours of a protein deficiency or a calcium deficiency or something. So that was it. So I went away to college. It was the early 1970s, and I started to hear there were a few vegetarians on campus, but I never actually met one. But during that time, actually, I started questioning everything. It was during the Vietnam War era. And in 1975, right after I graduated, I decided with my younger brother, again, his name is Ed, that we would go on a spiritual pilgrimage. We decided we would go to California. We thought if we went to California, we'd find more spirituality. Mm-hmm. And we thought we would walk. We'd go on we would walk all the way and meditate. And so we did. We left home, we started walking. We walked as far as Buffalo, New York. And took us about a month to get there, and it was cold by October. And so we headed south, and we actually walked all the way down through upstate New York, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Kentucky, into Tennessee, eventually to Alabama. And in Tennessee, we stopped on our walk for about a month in a community there that was the largest hippie commune in the world back in 1975. It was called The Farm. And there was 900 people living there, and they were all what we would call vegans. They didn't eat any meat, dairy, or eggs, or even honey. And it was all out of basically compassion for animals and also for other human beings, because there was this understanding that they had, which I realized is true, that we have all this human starvation and hunger, and it's mainly because we feed most of the food that we grow. About 80% of all the corn and beans and wheat and everything we feed to animals while people go hungry. So that's very wasteful use of resources. So they said, we're trying to create peace in the world by eating lower on the food chain so there's enough for everyone to eat. But they had about 200 children that were vegan from birth. They were all thriving. Everybody was doing great. So from that day that I talked to these people and really learned and understood it, I have never eaten meat in my life since 1975. And then about 5 years later, by that point, I was in California. I was living in San Francisco, Bay Area, and I learned more about dairy and egg production, so I became a vegan in 1975. So that was 44 years now ago. In 1980. That was 44 years ago. And then a few years later, in 1984, I decided to become a Buddhist monk. So I shaved my head and became a Zen Buddhist monk living in South Korea. And so for the second time in my life, I was in a community that was vegan. And this time, instead of being this new hippie thing from California, I realized that it's actually an ancient wisdom tradition, because this monastery in South Korea had been practicing what we would call vegan living for about 750 years. Since the 1200s, there was no meat, dairy, eggs, wool, silk, leather. You tried really to not even kill mosquitoes if possible, and just live a life of the ancient word from Sanskrit is ahimsa, which means non-violence or loving kindness and compassion for all life. And we were meditating from 3 o'clock in the morning till 9 o'clock at night, and I was in silence for about 3 months. And so it was a very intense meditation time, but the whole thing And I was living in meditation centers in the United States also. So for me, the spirituality and veganism really go together because they're based on realizing that one life is living really through all manifestations of life. And when we're kind to others, we're really being kind to ourselves. And if we harm others unnecessarily, we're just going to cause suffering to ourselves. We make them sick and we get sick. So the World Peace Diet is the book that I ended up writing eventually that puts together this big picture of the consequences of animal agriculture and how wonderful it is to liberate ourselves by liberating animals. And that as a society, if we continue to enslave animals and exploit them, we find the same thing happens to us. We get enslaved and exploited in a whole variety of ways. And part of that is our health. We get sick. And if you're not healthy, that's really a loss of freedom, because freedom really requires us in many ways to have energy and vitality. And if we don't have that, it's very difficult actually to fulfill our mission.
Yeah.
So the World Peace Diet gives this big picture, which includes the history and anthropology and psychology and social psychology and spiritual dimension, the religious dimension, political dimension, the health and environmental, all of this. Along the way, after coming back from Korea, I ended up getting a master's degree and a PhD in education. I taught college for quite a few years, and then decided to write books and spread the message of vegan living. Mm-hmm. And it's been great. The World Peace Diet actually became a #1 Amazon bestseller worldwide in 2010, and then it became translated into many languages. It's now up to about 18 languages. Wow. And so then we got basically invited to travel all over the world to spread this message to people in China, in India, in all over Southeast Asia, all over Europe, Eastern Europe, Western Europe, South America, Africa, the Middle East, everywhere. So it's been great to do that because we've realized that this vegan movement is really growing. It's about health, compassion, and joy, and freedom, and loving kindness, really, for all beings, and understanding how our intelligence, our natural intelligence, and our natural empathy can really blossom once we question the official stories in our society that basically indoctrinate us into eating animal foods. And so that's the final thing I'll just say, is that I realized that the only reason I was eating animal foods all those years was because I was just following orders that were given to me by very loving, caring people, my mother, my father, all these people. But they were doing it because it came through the generations. This comes through the generations. Right. So I don't blame anyone. It's just understanding that if we really want to create a world of freedom and abundance and health and sustainability, we can do it. There's nothing stopping us. If we would eat a plant-based diet, we would free up enormous quantities of land. We could be healthy. We could feed everyone on a fraction of the resources. So it's just a matter of understanding that and then sharing these ideas with other people like you're doing. So thank you so much for doing that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, I think that, well, first off, that's crazy and awesome that you actually lived on the farm. I've heard of the farm. Like I don't remember where along my journey I've heard of it. And I was like, that sounds like an amazing place. I want to live there, but I've never known anybody that actually lived there. That's phenomenal and awesome. And also I will say, just the indoctrination, we homeschool our son. However, he goes to co-op twice a week. And I will just say the indoctrination starts so early, and it's in the textbooks and it's on the pictures in the books, and it's just everywhere. And I'm like, I can't, I mean, it's just, there's a difference between, you hear like Dr. Doug Lisle and Dr. Goldhammer saying like, we did eat animal products as we, survived, right? Like, this is how we, evolved, right? But we now know, and just like you said, like it's been practiced in other cultures. Like the problem is, it's not the homesteaders that are the problem. Okay. Like that's a whole other thing. All right. Like it's this incredible, horrible mass situation of farming that has literally been destroying humans and our earth for so many years. And
right.
It's like, I think there's this polarization of people. Like, I have homesteading friends, by the way, because we sell our produce at the farmers market. So it's like really, it's like I try, they're like, we're known as the plant-based people, like, and they think that we like hate them or whatever. I don't. I mean, I think that that's a whole situation, it's a different situation than these horrible CAFOs, these factory farms, like all of these things that are truly just the demise of our humanity. But I'm so tired of the polarization. It's sad, but we need to bring awareness. And I really want to know more about how you're living as well in terms of like your food. So I want to touch on that too. But sorry, I'm going on a rampage, but it really is programming. And I was very much programmed for a long time thinking that I had to have dairy in order to get protein. That was the last thing that I gave up. I was like addicted to dairy for like a full year because I gave up animal product or, meat and chicken and eggs and stuff. And I was like, where am I going to get my protein? So I ate a ton of dairy and I felt horrible, just absolutely
Right.
awful, just horrible. And then I was like, maybe I don't need this, the more I learned. And did your book come out around the same time as Diet for a New America?
Yeah, the World Peace Diet came out a little bit after that. Diet for New
Okay.
America was one of the early books by John Robbins,
I
and
feel like you guys are friends. Are you guys
yeah,
friends?
yeah, we're good. Yeah, we're
Okay.
friends. He loves my music. That's one of the main things.
Oh,
I would go to his talks and play the piano before he gave a lecture
oh,
back in the 1980s
I
and
love
1990s. And my book came out later, like in 2005.
it. Mhm.
And it builds on a lot of his work, but it goes much farther than his work.
For sure, yeah. There's that spiritual
So
aspect, it sounds
it's
like.
it brings in the spiritual aspect and a lot of the other aspects as well, and the devastating impact of eating fish, which his doesn't really talk about either. But dairy, you're right. I mean, I think dairy, especially cheese, which is really concentrated dairy,
Yeah.
takes about 10 pounds of milk to make 1 pound of cheese. It's probably the most devastating food anyone can eat for our own health, but also in terms of violence towards the sacred feminine. I mean, it's really a lot of cruelty in
Yeah.
dairy. I think it's what you're saying is really very interesting and very important because underlying everything, like you mentioned, and I also did, the indoctrination that we go through as children, and we have this idea that we just need to eat animal foods to get nutrients. But the thing to really remember, the key thing is that any nutrient that finds its way into the flesh of an animals or dairy products or eggs came originally from plants.
Right.
So all of the amino acids that make up all the proteins, all the essential fatty acids, all the carbohydrates, there's no carbohydrates in animal foods. All the fiber, there's no fiber in animal foods.
Right.
And vitamins and minerals, all come from plants. So if we just eat the plants directly, we not only vastly reduce the toxins that we're eating and that we're causing by voting, because when we take out our wallets, we're voting, we're paying. If I pay for meat, dairy, and eggs, I'm not only paying for animals to be slaughtered and abused, but I'm paying for farmers to spray glyphosate and all these other toxic chemicals, paraquat, which is causing Parkinson's disease, and all these other atrazine, which is causing all this terrible hormone disruption that's happening to children. And we have this whole transgender movement, terrible confusion that's going on. So many things are just destroying the web of our cultural relationships that are based on animal agriculture, because it's based really on this underlying, quite honestly, it's a satanic mindset, which is to harm others for our own benefit. It's never, in the long run, a good idea to harm others for our own benefit. And I used to teach college courses in comparative religion, and all the religions agree. That's the main thing they agree on, is the golden rule: don't do to others what you wouldn't want to have done to yourself, and in a positive way to give to others what you would like to have yourself. Be kind and loving and let others be free. And the corollary of that wisdom teaching is, whatever you sow, you will reap. Sooner or later, it all comes back. So we're very naive if we think we can sow seeds of violence and misery and disease millions of times every day, like we're doing with animals, and somehow magically reap health and freedom and abundance and peace for ourselves. It never has happened. It never will happen. For us to be worthy of a world of freedom and sustainability and radiant health, we need to offer that. We need to let the animals live their lives the way they did for millions of years without interfering with them, stealing from them, abusing and exploiting them, violently taking them off their lands and sticking them into cages, stealing their babies, impregnating them against their will on rape racks. I mean, the violence that we commit to these animals is devastating, really, on every level.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
that's
it's
the
awful.
foundation.
It is awful. And I'm sure that people can learn so much more about it in your book, the details and really how all of this is connected and how it really impacts everything on Earth. And now I know we have a short time here, so I want to talk with you about your diet in particular and how it evolved, because I am sure, well, I'm pretty sure, okay, I'm 99% sure that it didn't start out the Hippocrates way. Like, I'm sure that you probably weren't eating lots of sprouts and microgreens and green juices to start off with, were you? I mean, what does your plant-based diet look like, and how has it evolved? And I guess also I'm curious, what are you currently eating like a day in your life?
Right, yeah. Well, basically, yeah, I started out I was living in a Zen Buddhist meditation center in Alabama right after the farm. And so I started learning, and I actually read some books that talked about the importance of fasting. So I did some fasting, started cleaning out. I realized, gosh, I had 22 years of pretty toxic food. And, but the good thing is back in the day, back in the 80s, 70s and 80s, there really wasn't much in the way of processed vegan foods. If you were a vegan, you ate vegetables and fruits and nuts and seeds, and that was pretty much it. It wasn't like there is now all this vegan junk food.
Oh, it's
Like
the worst.
it wasn't that. So
Yeah.
that was a blessing in a lot of ways.
Yeah, true.
And but I did, like you say, I went through a learning curve, and as the vegan junk foods came out, I started trying them, back in the 90s and the early 2000s. But I didn't really feel that I wanted to eat them. I would try them and say, well, this is something you can try if you're transitioning.
Yes.
From eating animal foods into plant-based foods. You can have some vegan cheese and vegan meat, these whatever burgers and things. But pretty early on, I felt the importance of eating organic. And then when my wife Madeline came over from Switzerland, which was 32 years ago, she was Miss Organic. She was like total organic. And so we've been organic and vegan that whole time for the last over 30 years. And I was also speaking a lot at conferences, so I was really learning. From the very beginning, I've been an activist. So I knew for me to be healthy, it was important to eat whole foods mainly. So I think I've had a good diet, and I never drank alcohol. I never smoked. I never drank coffee. I've never watched television either. That's been a great thing. I stopped watching TV.
Yeah.
Back when I was in college in my 20s. So I haven't watched TV in 50 years. I haven't been to a doctor in 50 years. I haven't been to a drugstore in 50 years. I've been stayed out of the medical establishment basically completely the whole time for over 45 years. And I mean, I go to the dentist, sometimes have my teeth cleaned, but I haven't had cavities really at all to speak of. So I've been very blessed, my health. I mean, I'm now in my early 70s, but I feel like I can run around like I did when I was in my 20s. I feel I'm in great health. So it's fantastic. I never really did it. I did it mainly for animals, for spirituality and things like that. But I found that from the point of view of being healthy and not having to pay money for health insurance, I never paid money for health insurance. I never bought one aspirin or one Tylenol or one anything. And it's been great, so on that level. And so for 17 years, we lived full time in an RV, just traveling all over the country. And then after that, we bought a house in Northern California, and really with funds that were generated by writing books and playing the piano. And my wife's an artist, so it was just doing what we loved. And eventually we saved up enough money to buy a little house. And so we have some land, about a half an acre, and we've planted now 76 fruit and nut trees. So we have really a lot of food growing on the land. Plus we have 6 raised beds. So we have a lot of vegetables and berries and so forth. And so we go to the farmer's market and we sell some of our produce, some of our fruits. And we have a lot of persimmons, cherries, nectarines, and other peaches and things that we can sell. Now we've been there for about 10 years. So we have a nice big green smoothie in the morning.
Okay.
We usually have a pretty small lunch, some of our fruit from our garden, and maybe some oats. That Madeline has a little flaker that she flakes them herself, and everything we do ourselves. And then we usually have vegetables and maybe some starch in the evening. So it works really great. We're 100% vegan, like I say, for 44 years, whole food, organic, and it's really quite simple. But I'm very blessed to be married to someone who loves to prepare delicious food, and she's really good at it. And so we have
She's
a
a
wonderful
vegan homemaker.
Yeah, she is. She loves to, and I met her in Switzerland. So I always say the smartest thing I ever did, besides going vegan, was marrying my wonderful wife Madeline, and we really
Aww.
get along great. And like I say, we've been married now for over 30 years, and so we travel together. We share the vegan message, and really through trying to bring more awareness of the beauty of this earth and the beauty of our life through music and art and through meditation and spirituality, and just realizing that we're here on this earth to savor the beauty of life and the relationships that we have with each other, and to help create a world that's positive for our children. And that in order to do that, it means creating a foundation that reflects that, which we can do, which is based on plant-based foods that minimize the amount of suffering we cause to other beings. So our entire garden, it's a food forest. It's called the Karuna food forest. Karuna means compassion in Sanskrit. It's totally organic, no bone meal, no blood meal, no manure. It's just all vegan inputs. And it's great. We have a lot of food coming out of that, and it gets better every year. And Madeline loves to work in the garden, and I do quite a bit in the garden too. So it's
Amazing.
a labor of love. So we do that half the year, and then the other half of the year we travel like we're doing now, and we put on presentations sharing the message.
So good. So impactful. 2 things there. The vegan junk food, I think that's the only bad thing about the word vegan. Truly, that's the only bad thing about the word vegan.
Yeah.
It has really led people down the wrong path. So we have to really kind of continue spreading this message that vegan whole plant foods is
Right.
where it really is at. And we
Right.
have to, there's really good marketing and indoctrination that's happening
Right.
with that whole junk food vegan movement as well. So we have to be super careful. And then also I will just say I am a little jealous because you have persimmons. We live in Indiana. I planted pawpaws and I planted persimmons, and it's going to be like 7 years until that fruit comes. So that's amazing. Dr. Tuttle, thank you for your time. I have one last question that I ask everybody. And I'm just curious to know what this means to you. What does holistic living mean to you?
Oh, I love that word. Holistic has to do with seeing the big picture, that we're embedded within larger systems, and that we are ourselves a larger system that's made up of many smaller systems. We're made up of cells and systems and so forth. And so if we live our life to be a blessing to the larger systems, the family, the community, the earth, the cosmos, then we will find that the smaller systems that make up our physical body will work in harmony as well. So I think the word holistic also has to include the idea that what we are is essentially eternal consciousness. We're not just this body that was born and will die. What we are is the infinite and eternal consciousness that makes this body possible, this physical form. We're raised in a society that's the opposite of holistic. It's reductionistic. And the reason it's reductionistic is it's based on animal agriculture, which reduces beings to objects, to commodities. It's the most toxic deception you can ever have. Materialism is really the root of all the evil in the world. and the reductionism that makes so much money for the pharmaceutical medical complex has to be questioned with the spirituality of holism. Holistic living is spiritual living. It's realizing that we are life itself manifesting, but we're not just only the material level. We're much more than this.
Yes.
We are beings of consciousness, not just human beings, but cows and pigs and chickens and dogs and cats, and all living beings are manifestations of one life, which is not merely material. It is much more than that. It is eternal consciousness. And we can awaken to that when we quiet our mind through meditation or through connecting with nature and realize the greater life that we are. So thank you for asking that question. That's a very important one.
Absolutely. It's one of my favorite things to hear, everybody's different thoughts on it. So thank you so much. Thank you again for your time and
You're welcome.
just your existence. I really appreciate you, and I can't wait to do this. So thank you, Dr. Tuttle. Be well.
Okay, thank you, Stacey. Thanks, everyone. Take care. Bye.
Bye.